What Do Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, Football Manager, and Plague Inc. have in common? Welcome to episode 2 of Lesson Learned, and today we ask the question, what lesson can we learn from Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes? Now, I want to preface this video by saying that I do expect it to run a fair bit longer than the first episode, and that's for a couple of reasons. The first is fairly straightforward. I do think this topic is probably bigger than what was covered last time. But more importantly than that, I have a big history with Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. I've been playing Keep Talking since not long after its release, and pretty solidly for the last 5 years, and in that time, Keep Talking has sent me around the world. I've been to the other side of the planet because of this game, more than once. I have made lifelong friends because of this game. As I'm sure you all know, I've had a YouTube channel built because of this game with Rex and Silly. I've released a mod for Keep Talking. I've belonged to Keep Talking communities on Discord and TeamSpeak and Mumble. I've submitted speedrun records for Keep Talking. I have fallen in love through this game. I didn't want it to be more than a year before I released my second episode of Lesson Learned, but here we are. I said back in episode 1 that it was going to be an episode on Keep Talking, and given the history that I have with the game, the part of my life that it's been, I don't take this episode lightly. Over the course of the last year, I've chucked away several scripts that I thought just didn't do the game justice and adequately describe what's so fun about it. When I began making this episode, I had to start trying to qualify what it was that I liked so much about this game, to actually have to put that into words. And it's not been an easy task. As you can see, it's taken me this long to do it. To begin with, I thought about the obvious for anyone who's played the game, the communication. Keep Talking is a cooperative game where you have a diffuser and experts, and neither of those two people have all of the information required. There has to be an exchange of information to get the bomb defused. But that's not unique to Catane. Pretty much any cooperative game requires communication in order to succeed. Clearly there's more to it than that. So I got a bit more specific. Let's think about the asymmetrical nature of the co-op in this game. Like I just mentioned, there are two distinct roles in the game to be filled. There are diffusers and experts, and both of those have access to something that the other does not. If you're new to Catane, the way it works is that one player acts as the diffuser. They actually play the video game portion of Keep Talking. The other player or players are the experts, and they have physical printed out manuals with the instructions on how to defuse the bomb. The experts cannot look at the game, and the diffuser cannot look at the manuals, therefore requiring communication to succeed. But asymmetrical co-op is something that's still not unique to Keep Talking. I always think of those levels in Call of Duty where you have one player as a soldier on the ground and another who's in a helicopter or a plane providing overwatch as a prime example of asymmetrical co-op gameplay. Or how about those Mario Party games that are 3 versus 1? Or take a look at any co-op game that has classes. While both of these things in Keep Talking are interesting and they do contribute to the overall fun of the game, there's still some appeal about it that transcends both of these things. And that's something that's eluded me for more than a year, until last month, a good friend of mine, Trevor, sent me a copy of a little indie game called In Other Waters. In Other Waters is a game about exploring the uncharted depths of an ocean on an alien world teeming with undocumented life. Well, that's not entirely true. See, even though In Other Waters is an exploration game, you don't play as the explorer. This game is about exploring an alien world, but it's about someone else exploring an alien world. As the player, you experience this world through the computer built into the diving suit of the explorer. You play as the AI. What you're seeing on the screen here is not a menu in the game, this is the gameplay. Even though this alien planet is teeming with species, you never actually see any of them. Everything to you is a top-down topological map with symbols representing the things that the explorer is finding. In the context of the game, the explorer gets to see these things firsthand, but all you get are their verbal descriptions and a UI with which you can interact with the world. In Other Waters, the player experience is entirely secondhand. Contrast this with other games where you and your character see the landscapes, hear the ambience. The moving, the talking, the solving, the fighting, the building, it's all done by you directly. But in Other Waters, you're stuck with a crude interpretation of the ocean that's being explored. The game tells you there's a world out there, but your experience of it is completely abstracted. You can imagine your diving operator really down in the water, exploring and surviving, doing the things you'd usually do yourself in a game. They are moving and scanning, avoiding danger, choosing dialogue, all while you push buttons on your little teal and yellow window that obstructs your view of the world. And I find that fascinating. So, now I think we can answer the question that I posed 5 minutes ago. What do Keep Talking, Football Manager, and Plague Inc. have in common? They're games about not playing the game. They're games that present a set of circumstances to you, but then limit your interaction with it to a veneer that's been glossed over the world. As the title of the video suggests, there is a degree of separation between your actions and the consequences of your actions. In Plague Inc., a game about playing as an infectious disease bent on eradicating the entire world population, you don't actually have autonomous control over where your bacteria or virus spreads to. If anything, you essentially play as the DNA. The player makes a set of genetic decisions that are the first domino in the row, if you like, and then you observe the chaotic chain reaction that unfolds. In Football Manager, a game, if I have to explain, about managing a football team, or a soccer team for you Americans, the game tells you that there are literal football matches being played. You can see the scores, the bookings, the injuries, but you don't play the matches. And depending on your game version and options, sometimes you don't even see the matches, just the overview of the results. And those results, the results of a sports match, are not determined by how well you kick a ball. They are the product of decisions you make at a managerial level. And then, of course, there's our titular game, Keep Talking, where you get to defuse a bomb entirely by proxy. In fact, in Keep Talking, you don't even have the luxury of a menu or a heads-up display. You don't even get the overview that you get in Plague Inc. and Football Manager and in Other Waters. And here lies the beginnings of what makes Catane something really special, because even in this quite specific niche that we're discussing of vicarious gameplay, there are still some things that make it unique. In vicarious games, there's something of a black box that keeps the player a step removed from the game. When you take an action, it has to go via this layer of separation before it applies to the game world. And within that black box that you have to interact with, there is some kind of mystery contained within it, and it's different for each game. In Other Waters, the mystery is the undocumented terrain of the ocean and the species within it, and you have to kind of fill that encyclopedia in as you go. In Football Manager, there is an element of randomness. You don't know exactly how the decisions that you make will affect the game. The outcomes of matches are not precisely determined by your decisions, they're just influenced by them. And this is maybe even exaggerated in Plague Inc., where the game really thrives on this butterfly effect. There's a chaos to it. And while you make some simple decisions throughout the game, it may take quite a few playthroughs before you start finding the results of those predictable. But Keep Talking has no black box. There's no randomness to the outcome of your decisions and actions. There's no information about how to solve the puzzles that you have to discover for yourself. It's all detailed out in the manual. The middleman that you have to go between to interact with the game, for Catane, is a quite literal middleman. It's a middle person. It's your friend sat on the computer or in the VR headset, pushing buttons and cutting wires and talking to you. So unlike in Other Waters, Football Manager, and Plague Inc., which limit the information you have access to, in Keep Talking, no information is limited. The only thing that is limited is your method of obtaining the information. You can find out anything about the game world by just asking your friend to tell you what they can see. And then the game tries to work against you by obfuscating that information. You might ask for what a readout says, but occasionally that readout will say something like, or hold on, or say the word blank. You might ask for the numbers on a particular module, except that they aren't labelled in 1 to 4 order, and the order that they are labelled in changes every time you press a button. Learning information about the game world in Keep Talking requires precision of communication, which is a really interesting dynamic. But I don't think we need to go into too much detail about why co-op games are inherently fun. Playing games with your friends is fun, and if there is a discussion to be had there, then I think that's for another time. But what about vicarious gameplay? I've given examples of games that are vicarious games, and I've told you that I find them intriguing, but why? Playing in Other Waters was an epiphany for me. A moment of self-realization where a game design preference of mine that had only been subconscious up to that point was finally clear, and I could put it into words. Now I look back at my diary of old game ideas, and I see this principle of vicarious gameplay running through a lot of them. I've played a challenge run of Dark Souls before, wearing a blindfold, where my cousin would direct me, or I him, through the game, and it's one of the most fun challenges I've done in a game. It really doesn't get much more vicarious than being quite literally blind and having to solely rely on someone else's instructions to get through it. To explain what I think is the appeal of vicarious gameplay, we actually return to our topic from the first episode, limitation. Overcoming limitation is primarily what makes a game fun. A game presents you with a puzzle, it limits the clues that it gives you, and you solve your way to an answer. That's fun and satisfying. A game presents you with a difficult platforming level, and limits your movement tech to running, jumping, perhaps a couple other techniques, and honing your reaction times, your on-the-spot thinking, your judge of distance and timing, and your understanding of the game's physics to overcome that challenge is fun and satisfying. As I said in the previous episode, limitation is what makes a game, and overcoming that limitation is what makes playing a game rewarding. And that's where vicarious gameplay comes in. I think that being held at arm's length away from the game world being portrayed is, on paper, the ultimate limitation. You are unable to directly affect the game world, but you can still indirectly affect it with intention and to produce useful results. And that's really satisfying, and it's uniquely interesting in a way that a lot of other games aren't. What makes this especially fun in Keep Talking is that you don't just get puzzle information from some NPC or an interface. You never click a mouse or type on a keyboard. As an expert, in theory, you could complete the entire campaign without ever going near your computer. And yet you're a vital part of the team, and the diffuser would be unable to defuse the bombs without you. Your friend, a real person you can ask or tell anything, is the conduit by which you experience everything about the game, or inversely, you're the conduit by which your friends play the game, and that's so cool. Playing Catane is completely organic, because the information you receive about the game world isn't limited to a set of variables or pre-written dialogues, it's limited to just human conversation. That and the random generation of puzzles mean that you will never experience the same thing twice. The experts never truly know what the diffuser is seeing, besides what they describe. This is all sounding quite niche, and the lesson from this episode is a little more specific than last time. Finding advantage in limitation applies almost by definition to just about any game that you could make, but vicarious gameplay may simply not be applicable to the game you're making. However, the principles of vicarious gameplay may not be as niche as I may have made them sound. Entirely vicarious games are a rare breed, but a lot of games contain examples of maybe one vicarious mechanic, or have some vicarious flavour running through them. So here's a couple examples of games that touch on this kind of gameplay without being entirely abstracted. First, Papers, Please. This is a game where you are a border security officer, and it is up to you to allow or disallow entrance into the country. For the most part, there's nothing vicarious about it. You are right there directly interacting with the people who are coming to your security gate. But as the game progresses, you find that your actions have more of an effect than just allowing the person into the country, or not. The simple yes or no decisions that you make to let someone in or to not let them in begins to affect the political climate of your country. It affects the operation of your government, and without giving too much away, how the people who respond to your government operate. A shady character may approach your security gate and ask you to let them in for the good of the country, even though they don't have the required documents. And it's up to you to think beyond the scope that you're working at in the game, to perhaps try and predict what the outcome would be if you actually did let this person slide, who would be entering the country illegally, or to put it in game terms, to actually break the game's rules to let them in. You may also find, as the game progresses, that the decisions you make also begin to have an effect on the livelihood of your family, even though you never actually see them. The next example is something very different than any game we've talked about so far. But how about Screen Cheat? Screen Cheat is a competitive multiplayer first-person shooter where all players in the arena are invisible. In order to work out where people are and have any hope of killing them, you have to look over at the screens of your opponents on the split-screen layout of the game. To find success in Screen Cheat, you have to do something that would be considered cheating in any other game, but here it is encouraged and an integral mechanic. It may not seem like there's an obvious connection here to Vicarious gameplay, but I think there is something to be said for the fact that this game doesn't just present you with all of the information. Your opponents are invisible, so you are forced to partially experience this game through not just your own first-person view, but the views of your opponents. You have to spy on where they are by looking at the game through their eyes. Next, let's revisit a game that I mentioned for its asymmetrical gameplay, because it's also a good example of Vicarious gameplay. Call of Duty, specifically Black Ops 2, has a series of missions called Strike Force, which are a little different than your typical Call of Duty mission. You're not just responsible for yourself, you have tactical control over a squad of soldiers, and drones and robots. I believe you can change who you have control of at any given time, but besides the single soldier or robot that you are seeing the first-person view of, everyone else acts autonomously. But although their moment-to-moment decisions are automatic, they do respond to your tactical decisions. You could tell a group where to go, or whether to attack or defend, or to regroup. To some extent you do have direct control on the battlefield, it's still a first-person shooter, and you can fire a gun at enemies, but partially you also experience these levels vicariously through the rest of your squad. And finally, we come to Shadow of Mordor. Shadow of Mordor has a really cool mechanic in it called the Nemesis system. A whole hierarchy of orc leaders patrol their open world. Each of them has their own rank and their own squad of subordinate orc warriors. What's cool about this is that it's not just a static set of mini-bosses. This hierarchy is completely dynamic. As you eliminate orcs in the chain of command, other ones can get promoted, and they get buffs as they do so. If an orc kills you in combat, they may earn new buffs and resistances based on your fighting style. You can also attempt to spark inner conflict and have the orcs simply kill each other. Shadow of Mordor is not just a game where you go from killing boss to boss. It's a game where your actions influence the power structure of Sauron's military establishment. This is relevant to us because there is a degree of removal here. Not every single event and dynamic change in the structure is a direct result of something that you do, but you can influence it. I hope this gives you some ideas of how Vicarious gameplay can apply in different contexts, but I think you'll be hard-pushed to find a game that does it better than Keep Talking. This is one of my all-time favourite games. And hell, you don't even need a copy of it to play. You can be an expert and play along with the Vicarious side of things anytime you want, and I recommend it. So if you think this game looks interesting, there are links in the description to both the Great Berate and the official Keep Talking Discord channels, where you can look for a diffuser to party up with. Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes is a game about not being able to see the game. But unlike other comparable titles, Keep Talking stands almost alone as a game that creates an interdependency between one person who can see the game and one who can play it. It's a game about understanding one another, a game about learning your friends' quirks of language, a game about a symbiotic relationship where the players adapt and come to a mutual understanding of strategy and communication method together. It took me 13 months to make this video because of my failings to relate the ingenuity of this game's design. But in the end, one of the biggest strengths of Keep Talking is that it's a wholesome game about friendship and teamwork, working together to solve a difficult problem. Overcoming a challenge with a friend beats the hell out of overcoming a challenge alone, and that's where Keep Talking shines. Even a bad game can be made fun just by sharing the experience with friends or family, so to enjoy a game as well designed as Keep Talking with friends makes it one of the best games you could hope to play.
904.
Oh, yeah.
8.
All available experts.
All available experts have fucking completed the Centurion. Thank you, Ash.
Thank you, boys.
thank you very much for watching this episode. Thank you for hanging on for 13 months with this episode. And I also want to say a huge thank you to our very generous YouTube members. Inferno, Fred V, Null Ops, Thomas Smith, and Nobut Krog have all been members of our YouTube channel for more than a year now. That is amazing. Thank you very much. Also, we have Mikalo, Dritz941, I Am a Guinea Pig, Oryx Orike, Inherbeaver, Tethra, Velia Falconieri, G-Freak, Ravy88, and Varuna. Next time, we'll be doing things a little bit differently. The last 2 episodes we've looked at the strengths of an indie game, but next time we'll be looking at the shortcomings of a AAA game and asking what lesson we can learn from that. I'll see you then.